Hello and welcome to the Women in Local Government Future Leaders webinar. My name is Catherine Carter. I'm Chief Executive Officer with Local Government Professionals Australia. We're webcasting this morning from Canberra on Ngunnawal country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people and their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and the capital region. I also acknowledge and welcome Torres Strait, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be participating in this webinar today. Welcome to everyone. For first-timers, the purpose of this series is to share practical work skills tailored to women. We want to encourage emerging leaders and support an increase in the number of women in the executive level of local government. But this isn't a club, we're open to all people. So please join in, participate, and support your women co-workers. Today we're exploring a personal leadership journey through the eyes of a senior woman in our sector. Stephanie Addison-Brown, Chief Executive Officer of the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River in Western Australia. Stephanie, hello, and thank you for your time today. All right. Over the course of this webinar, we'll be learning a lot about Stephanie's journey. For starters, it begins not here in Australia, but in the UK, and not in the local government sector, but actually in publishing. Are you intrigued? I certainly am. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers, and I'll invite you to take part in a Q&A conversation with Stephanie a little bit later on during this webinar. But for now, let's first get to know our guest. Stephanie Addison-Brown, the floor is yours.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you, Catherine. Good morning to all the viewers. I'm Steph. I'm the CEO here at the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River. We're here on Wodandi in Pilbaraman country. It's a beautiful day here in Margaret River. The sun is out, but it's very cold. It's wintry. Just as a quick introduction, I started out my childhood in the southwest of England in Devon, quite similar to the environment I'm in now. Grew up on Dartmoor National Park, had quite a sheltered childhood. I went to an all-girls school. I rode my ponies around the moor and had a very nice childhood. But I knew there was more to the world and I wanted to go and explore it. I did some science A-levels, which is the equivalent of ATAR, and went straight to university after school. I needed to go and do something else, spread my wings, go and meet some new people. And I went to university straight away at 18 and enrolled for a psychology degree. But over time, we were encouraged to take additional subjects and actually switched to doing philosophy. So at 21, I graduated with a degree in philosophy and then really needed to go and see the world for real. I ended up working in London in a hospital in Westminster, right opposite the Houses of Parliament. So I really sort of felt I'd arrived in a big city by that point. But a year later, the travel bug set in and I ended up going to Australia for a working holiday. And I worked and travelled for that year. I did some temping work at Deutsche Bank and at ANZ. I know a lot of my friends were doing bar work, but I wanted to put on a suit and go and get some skills. And I actually ended up working as the PA to the Deutsche Bank's Y2K manager. That was just before the year 2000, where everyone was worried about the clocks ticking over and everything breaking. So it was a really interesting time to be in Sydney, and it was a really interesting role to have. But it was temporary, and I was only in Australia on that working holiday and ended up going back to London. I ended up working for a couple of consulting firms, and then before I actually came to Australia, I was the office manager at Lonely Planet, the travel guide publishers in London. That was a really exciting role for me. I think I'd found my calling. I love travel. I found a role that aligned to my values. It was about us providing independent travel advice, telling good stories about areas in the world, and encouraging some sustainable travel where people respect the destinations that they go to. But as life does, it threw a couple of curveballs, and I got married, and we decided we wouldn't stay in London if we were going to have children. So we ended up coming to Western Australia, and I couldn't have planned this, and I didn't know that, back in my early 20s, this is where I would end up. We ended up living in Mandurah in Western Australia. And if you know Mandurah, it's very different from London. It was a very small town. And I felt quite isolated. But anyway, long story short, I had my son and started looking around for some work. The city of Mandurah offered a contract role, a temporary role. So I thought I'd try that. Applied for that and was successful, and ended up working there. I sort of fell into local government. I wasn't really looking for a government career at all. It hadn't even crossed my mind that that would be where I would end up. But the beautiful thing about local government is you can try lots of different roles on for size. You can move around really easily. And if you've got the right approach and you're enthusiastic and you're prepared to put your hand up for things, there are so many opportunities to get involved. That was in 2004. I did undertook 4 different roles at Mandurah, and I was there for 7 years. I had a really great time there, fantastic bosses, really great teams, interesting projects to work on. I veered from corporate development to economic development. I even managed a visitor centre for a year. And then I ended up managing the strategy, marketing, corporate development portfolio for the city, which was quite a big deal at the time. But then, of course, as life does, I was looking for a new challenge. And I think the 7-year itch probably is a real thing. I looked into my future and went, oh, you know, nobody here's leaving. So what's my next move? If the directors are here till the retirement, is this going to keep me challenged forever? And just around the same time that I was thinking about this, a neighbouring council, just about an hour away, advertised for a suite of new directors. It was a new start for that council, and I threw my hat into the ring and didn't really have much time to think about it, because 2 weeks later they offered me a job. And then I had to decide, am I going to go or am I going to stay? And I decided to go. At this point, I'd actually separated from my son's father. We're on good terms, we always have been, but it was a big call to take Ben with me and sort of do that weekend thing. But at the end of the day, it was a decision we made, and it was definitely the right one. I was down in the city of Bunbury as the Director of Corporate and Community Development for almost 8 years. And during that time, I also seconded over to be the Director of Planning for 12 months just to help out when someone had left. It's a really good opportunity to build your skills. If you're going to do a leadership role in local government, you need to have some sort of grounding in planning, in corporate, and have a community mind. So I think for me, that was a really great opportunity to get a more holistic view of everything that happens in local government and how decisions are made. Again, I wasn't forced to do it. I put my hand up, and luckily my CEO decided that he thought I would be capable and a good person to sort of lead that team through that year. When I went back to my normal job, my substantive role as Corporate and Community Director, I was there for a couple of years, and to be honest, I feel that I was on a repeat cycle, and it was probably time to do something else. When you're doing the same thing over and over and you're not feeling fresh with it, I felt it was time to have a think about the future again. I hadn't ever intended to be a CEO, and all my former colleagues will will definitely confirm that. And the neighbouring councils all advertised for CEO positions, and I looked at those and decided it's not for me. There was a lot of subdivision, a lot of development, a lot of those sorts of things. I thought that's just not what I want to do with my life. But then the CEO role here at the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River, was advertised, and it was a completely different feeling. I got that fire inside. I said, I really want that job. They were doing great things with sustainability, climate action, real community stuff, and it was the stuff that really fires me up. I mean, the planning and the development, that's all happening, but they were very thoughtful here in how they were approaching all those things. And I thought, yeah, I could really play a good role here, and I could really help them out. So for me, it was about finding a role where I could be useful, that aligned to my values. I certainly didn't want to be responsible for more and more subdivisions sprawling out of Bunbury. I wanted to do something really strong with a community, and I was motivated. I felt that urge to go and apply. And then luckily, 3 years ago, they gave me the job. And it's been fantastic. I've been really lucky with a great team, a really great council. People here are really motivated by their values. And for me, that spurs me on every day. Yeah, and I guess, after all the years of trying things on for size, I feel like I found something I really care about, really care about. And we're doing good things here. We've just become an eco-tourism destination, formally accredited, which we're the first in Western Australia. We've got a climate action plan. Those things are things I'm proud of. So yeah, I think if I have any advice for anyone, it's if you're looking for new challenges, make sure that they're things that you're going to enjoy and that motivate you, and don't get stuck on a repeat cycle with things you don't enjoy.
So brilliant, thank you, and so inspiring as well. I have a series of questions that I want to ask you about, but this is the opportunity also for people that have dialed in today from around the country to ask your own questions. If you take a look at your screen, there's a chat function on there. If you send through your questions, I'll be able to read them myself and ask Stephanie. It'd be fantastic if you could provide, if you are happy to, your name and where you're from. That gives us a bit of a sense of where you are from around the country, and I can actually already see a couple of them coming in, so I'll come to those in a moment. But I might start with my own question. So Steph, there's a strong narrative through what you're saying of trying different things. For people that are looking for an executive leadership role in local government, would you say it's better to do what you've done, which is try different areas and different things, or is it better to be a strong specialist in a particular area, such as planning? What would your advice around that be?
I think it probably depends on the sort of role you're looking to undertake. If you're going to become a corporate services director, it really helps to have that corporate background. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It'd be great to have an accountancy qualification or something like that, because you're bringing a level of expertise in. But I think as a CEO, you have to wear a number of hats. You have to be really good at media and comms. You have to be really politically savvy. You have to understand what every part of your organization is doing. And ultimately, we're choreographers. We're keeping things on track every day. We've got our finger on the pulse. We're looking at the media. We're dealing with our councillors. We're trying to manage political situations in our community. And it's not just managing an organization. It's managing all the things that go with that. And I think anyone with any skill set can do this. But I think the broader your skill set, the more intuitive some of these things will be. I think it might be harder if you're an engineer and that's what you really love doing, and then you need to look at the community side of things. If that's a passion of yours, that's great. But I think if you don't enjoy those things, maybe look more for that sort of works director or infrastructure director kind of role. For me, I'm obviously an all-rounder. I'm certainly not a specialist in any of these areas, but for me, that's worked. But I certainly wouldn't say there's a right path or a wrong path. I think you've got to find what fits you and try a few things on, and you'll soon know if you're not enjoying them.
So, your advice to younger women: how do younger women make those opportunities happen for them? How do they identify the opportunities and then grab them, make them work? What would be your advice to younger women about identifying opportunities and then taking them and moving forward?
Yeah, I'll just say don't be afraid of trying something. I took on secondments. I put my hand up for project teams. So, for example, at City of Mandurah, they were developing a new website. So I put my hand up to be the rep from my team, got involved, and that ended up with me running the project. So I think just ask for the opportunities, get involved, sort of roll your sleeves up. Don't be afraid to do a bit of extra work, even if that's a bit of extra study, those sorts of things. The big challenge, I think, for women is, if it comes to looking for a promotion or a new challenge, are you prepared to leave your organisation and move? If you're in a city, you can probably go to another council quite easily, but I had to move from one regional area to another. And that's a decision that you need to make with your family or your loved ones. And there are lots of implications of moving. If you've got kids, they might need to move school. The main thing is to have a support network around you. And when I moved to Bunbury, I didn't have a partner, and I sort of did it alone. But I built a really strong support network of friends and sort of, a little bit of after school care for my son and things like that. And as long as those things are in place, you can succeed. I think things get really tough if you don't have all that in place. I would also encourage people to get a mentor, and your mentor will change over the course of your career. Your friends are there forever, and they're going to be there as your comfy cushion and your big hug. But your mentor is your coach, and they're going to push you hard, and they're going to challenge you in ways that your friends probably can't because they're so emotionally invested in your happiness. You need somebody to push you along. You need to it could be your boss, or it could be another colleague at work, or it could be someone completely external to the organization. But find that person that you can talk to and who will challenge you and prompt you to think about all the things you need to think about before you put your hand up for new things. And sometimes just taking the plunge is worth it. You sort of feel the exhilaration of the challenge, but also the sort of, I guess, being proud of yourself for having a go as well. It's really important.
Can I ask you a little bit more about that, about support networks and mentors? Because as you've said, for many people to find the roles that they want to work in, they can take you to geographically different areas. So how for you so you were obviously aware of it, that you needed to find your champions and your people to support you. How did you do that? It's a two-part question. How did you develop that support network around you? But also, how did you find a mentor? Was that something that someone you deliberately targeted, or was it part of a program? I'd be really interested to hear how you did that.
Yeah, I think I didn't move too far away from friends, so my social networks were still intact. And when I was committed to being a director, I knew it'd be a lot of hard work, so I didn't have a lot of social time, say, in the evenings anymore. So I could be quite dedicated to sort of being a mum and working. And then the weekends, you just kind of juggle it and make it fit. But other people, you might rely on aunts, uncles. I mean, you might have it may not be children, and maybe other caring responsibilities. You might have a partner who also has career aspirations. It's always a negotiation here. But I think, if you open up all the doors and see what looks like an opportunity, your support networks will follow you and help you out, and you'll build new ones in a new place. So it's fairly easy to make friends in local government. The people who work in this industry are really caring, lovely people, and they want to connect. So I've always found it quite easy to sort of click with people wherever I've gone. The mentoring is really important. Local government professionals, and I've been a member here in Western Australia for well over a decade. I'm now actually on the board of the WA branch of local government professionals, and the number of networks and opportunities, informal mentoring as well. I joined the Corporate Planners Network originally, and then the Community Development Network, and various others. So you can find the mentoring, even if it's not formal, through others who have experience, who are willing to share and willing to support you. The great thing in local government is the councils aren't in competition with each other. It's a really supportive group of people who want to help each other out, because we all care about getting good outcomes for our communities. And if we've done something good here, we'll share it with someone else because it means another community benefits. And it's the same with the staff. I've spoken to so many people over the course of my career who've offered their time, could just be a coffee, or they've said, call me anytime. Or, and in my case, a couple of formal mentors set up either through local government professionals or through my CEO's contacts, where someone has been recommended and I've approached them. And again, for me, they probably lasted 1 to 2 years, and then that person is no longer the person I need to be talking to. It's, we've had a great journey together, but I'm looking to do something else. I'm looking for a different sort of someone to bounce off who's got a different skill set. For me, I've spoken to a number of other CEOs in the industry who are more experienced than me. But I've also right now got a mentor of someone who has not been involved in local government, who's been has been quite heavily involved in state government, but doing some very non-governmenty things at the moment. And he's fantastic. He's just possibly one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And it's a real privilege to talk to him, because I walk out of there every time we have a coffee and think, yeah, that's really helpful. And and I guess we'll see how long that lasts. But you can find, if you're looking for mentors, just seek recommendations or use local government professionals. But again, keep your friends and your mentors separate. Your mentor needs to be your coach.
Thank you again. I've now got this streaming in, some questions from people around the country. I'll start with one from Alison in New South Wales. She says, Stephanie, how do you manage the relationship with the elected councillors? And what is your advice about councillors who don't adhere to governance practices?
Yeah, it's tough. The elected members, I'm lucky here. We've got 7 really intelligent, dedicated, governance-conscious elected members. I know councils don't always have that. As a CEO, I need to be talking to them continually. We do, excuse me, we do some pretty thorough governance training, but of course there are always a few that maybe bring a different agenda or don't want to sort of follow the guidelines strictly. For me, I spend a lot of time talking to my elected members. We have informal workshops where we talk about what's going on around the Shire. I keep the relationship really positive. There's a clear line of delineation where the elected members cannot step into operations, as we all know, but I choose to step over the line into their space constantly. So I feed them as much as soon as I know something, they know the same, to the point where I think they just know that I'm telling them everything and they trust me. I mean, there's nothing I'm doing or that I know. I send them a weekly update with, you know, sort of meetings I've been to and conversations that have been going on and things we're hearing in the community. And I keep a really strong dialogue with my Shire president as well. I do know, obviously, if you know, you're going to get a couple of elected members in careers where they're just not interested in building that trust. They're here for a reason. And there are obviously sort of governance processes that you need to follow. And as a CEO, you have to do it. It's your obligation. So that's another thing to think about as a CEO. It's not just sort of, you know, I guess, talking up the positives of leadership. There are some really tough days in these roles as well, and you need to be fairly resilient. You need to be authentic and have a high level of integrity yourself. Be very transparent with everything you're doing as a CEO. Tell them everything all the time. I don't mean sort of every day you ring them, but I mean they need to always know before the community knows. They need to know why you're thinking something, why you're approaching something in a certain way, and sound them out. The more you talk to them and, you know, treat them as a team, the warmer they become and the happier they are with what you're doing, because they feel that they're sort of working with you. And mine really value that. I think you only really want to sort of draw that heavy line if there's, you know, an actual compliance issue or a problem. And then it is your obligation. You don't have a choice. Yeah, so I meet with mine regularly. We brief them on a lot of the technical things that are going on, and obviously agenda briefings and other things that everyone else has. But I keep a dialogue with them as well that not every CEO does, and you don't have to do. But for me, it really works. It means I've got a personal relationship with all of them, and it means that they're all feeling very well supported and very well informed. And then if there is an issue or they're not sure about something, you've got a lot of kind of trust in that sort of relationship where they you know, assume you're doing the right thing rather than try and find a fault with you. So
I think you've possibly answered this question in your remarks just now, but Liz Byrne has asked if you would describe your leadership style. I guess I've picked up from what you're saying, it's open communication, transparent, decisive when you need to be. Is there anything else that you would say to elaborate on that, or to provide a summary of your leadership style?
I think you've got to be yourself, and you're allowed a bit of personality in these jobs. You don't have to be perfect. I remember one job back in Mandurah, someone gave me a promotion and I turned up with a new jacket and thought I better put some makeup on, better do this and better do that. It lasted a week. You are always going to default to being who you are. If you find an organisation that fits your values, you're going to be very happy. You're not going to be overthinking those things. But I think, especially with the elected members, when you interview as a CEO, you're being interviewed by a group of councillors, probably haven't been trained in recruitment, probably haven't necessarily employed a CEO before, probably, you know, really don't know how to do a performance review for you. So for me, the interview was really critical, where I've formed a personal connection with each of those elected members. They weren't sitting there with their score sheet going, has she done this, has she done that? By the time you're in the interview, you know your resume is good enough, or they wouldn't have invited you in. The interviews where you've got to form a connection with that panel, and wherever it is in the organisation, but particularly for counsellors, because they're looking for someone they can work with. And in a leadership role, that's really critical. They have to feel that they can work with you, that they can trust you. So be yourself. If it doesn't work for them, then you're probably in the wrong place anyway, and go and look for something else. And if it does work, you've got a really good start point where you've formed a connection and it's working. You know, you've got a similar vision. You can sort of see how you're going to work together. It's quite a positive way to start. But if you get the wrong vibe and you're not connecting and you're not really enjoying spending the interview with them, then it's possibly the wrong place for you to be anyway.
Okay. Jen in Tasmania has asked, what further education did you have after your original degree? Have you done courses and other professional development and so on during your local government career journey?
Yeah, not as much as many. I did a postgraduate management course in the UK with what used to be the Institute of Personnel and Development. It's now, I think, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. So, yes, I did have some grounding with a management postgrad. But since then, actually, very little. I've done a lot of that kind of, work-based training where I might be working on a specific project and you get some skills or some training in that. But it's really, so far, really been things I've picked up through working in different roles. And I think that's also the plus of seconding around. If experience, and I can say, with all confidence that 3 years ago I sat in a room with my counsellors, they wanted to know about my experience and they weren't remotely interested in my qualifications. And maybe that's just this council here. They wanted someone they could work with. But by the time you've delivered enough things in local government, you've proven yourself. Being on the executive team in Bunbury, I've seen 8 budgets through. We delivered a lot of strategic planning work. They didn't need me to have an MBA to show I could do that stuff. They wanted someone they could work with. So those things, I'm not saying those things are not important. They are, and a lot of the CEOs here in the Southwest are highly qualified and deservedly have their roles because of that. But for me, I weighed up doing an MBA over and over, and I keep veering into not doing one. So it's obviously not something I'm feeling the passion for. So far I haven't needed to do more, but I would say it does certainly make you more competitive to have those qualifications, and they are valued. But I think they will get you as far as an interview. At the interview, it's about who you are and the personality. They want to see that you can work hard, that you have integrity, that you have discipline, but you also need a bit of a personality. You've got to connect with them in some way.
I think I read somewhere something that you had said, which was one of the main challenges of being a female leader in a local government setting is feeling ready to apply for the job in the first place. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. Women, there's a lot of self-doubt. We continually talk ourselves out of things, and I'm talking about all my friends, all my former colleagues, myself. We're our own worst critics sometimes. My advice, and just through my experience, throw your hat in the ring. If it doesn't work out, well, you didn't lose anything, and if it does, you might surprise yourself. Again, this is where the mentor is helpful. They will challenge you and give you that comfort, help you build that confidence to go that step. Your friends will always be your cheer. They're always going to cheer you on. They're always going to be happy for you and excited for you, but they're not necessarily the best judge of when you're ready. Your mentor will help. Your other work colleagues will help. And I think don't be afraid to sort of seek that support. I think it's sort of traditionally known that men will just apply anyway and they don't lose sleep over it. If we need a few people to talk us into it, great. Go and chat to a few of your contacts and say, what do you think? I was looking at this role, or, I was thinking about a new challenge, and people go, yeah, you should apply for that. And it does bolster your confidence quite a bit, and you can talk it through. I think what's the worst? Throw your hat in the ring, and if it doesn't come off, then you haven't lost anything at all. But I think if you don't try, you'll always wonder. You'll always sit there wondering. And I found out after I got this role here in Margaret River, I found out that there were 64 applicants, and I felt really panicky and intimidated by that after I started, which is crazy because I got the job. But I sort of had a moment of self-doubt. So why did they pick me? My God, they had six, and then, your friends go, well, why not? And absolutely, why not? You're just as good as anyone else. And on the day, it was your turn. So don't ever feel that you're not good enough. You're absolutely. And yeah, give it a go. Try it on. And if you're not ready, don't put yourself out into a really uncomfortable space. But actually, it's like anything. Once you take the leap, it's much more fun than you thought it would be. You know you can do a job. You know you've got that strength. It's just, give yourself the opportunity to prove it.
Isn't that interesting? So many senior female leaders I've spoken to have actually described what you've just described. You actually get the job, then you discover there are 64 other people that applied for it, and it's then you get your moment of doubt when clearly the evidence shows that you were the best person for the job and that they want you to succeed because they appointed you into the role. People don't invest their time in people that they think won't succeed in the role. It's an interesting one. I think in your case, correct me if I'm wrong, you succeeded a retiring CEO. Were there challenges in stepping into the role to perform the role after someone had been there, I think, for a while and was retiring? Did that present its own challenges for you?
No, it was actually quite a positive. Gary Evershed had been here a good 10 years and had delivered a lot of good things in his time. But because he retired, everyone sort of wished him well and they were ready for something fresh. So I think I probably came in at a good time because they were saying, well, hey, what's the future? And we want to get involved in sustainability and climate things now. So I think they were potentially looking for someone a bit different. There was also a gap of about a year where someone had been acting for a while after Gary retired, just while they went through the recruitment process. So there had been a bit of, the organisation had got used to Gary not being around. And luckily for me, he still lives in Margaret River and we have coffee from time to time. He's really supportive. So he's sort of, very happy not to be involved. He's off traveling. He's in Europe at the moment. He definitely doesn't want to get back involved in the Shire, but he's kind of there if I need to call. And I haven't really called him that much, but it's sort of nice to know he's still around and, I can check in from time to time. So I think it just depends on who the person was before you, the reason they left, and moving that organizational culture can be different. It can be quite hard work. For me, the organisation here was functioning really well and we were just driving forward into a new future, and people were ready. So it wasn't, a really scary thing for them or for me when I started. Of course, I started and within that first year, COVID happened. So none of our best laid plans really sort of, came off the way we thought they would, but same with everyone everywhere, of course. But yeah, no, we've made a pretty good go of it, and we're still on that journey, which is exciting. I think for me, lucky that the organisation was ready. There were some new councillors who were ready for a change. So I think Gary was able to sort of, respectfully retire with lots of goodwill and accolades. And then there was a gap, and then I came in with a new approach, which people were ready for.
I'd like to come back to talking with you about things you had to manage in your role during COVID. But in the role that you have now, or perhaps other roles that you've stepped into, have you ever found yourself in a position of walking into a job and having to make some tough decisions straight up? And if you did, how did you manage that?
Yes, even here, 3 years ago, we had 3 directors with some very lopsided portfolios where one sort of had half the organisation, the other 2 had sort of the other half between them. We also had just opened a new performing arts centre and there wasn't much money in the budget to get that up and running. So within the first year, I restructured the whole executive team. We now have 2 directors. We run lean, but my view is leaders shouldn't be sitting there, doing all the paperwork. We've got loads of people in the organisation doing a lot of the work. The leaders should be driving things. And I think with a small and quite tight dynamic on our exec team, we get quite a lot of things done quite quickly. We don't end up in silos. We have daily conversations about what we want to do, and that sort of then goes out back through the managers. So that first year, I did a restructure. Two of the directors actually left as a result. And I hired a new director for that new merged directorate. So very tough, but actually the organisation welcomed the change because they had felt very siloed before, where they put something up to their director, wait for them to talk to the other director, they went back to the other team, and now they're all, they can just get on with things. They've got, very consistent voices at the leadership level, and everyone's sort of, working as one team now, which was the goal. It also meant we saved $200,000 a year, which we could put into the entertainment centre's salary budget. So there was actually a good reason to do it.
Like nearly everyone in the country, you came into the role just ahead of global pandemic, and also you've experienced the impact of natural disasters where you are as well, haven't you? In your case, bushfires. So on the East Coast, as well as in the West, there have been bushfires, we've had catastrophic flooding and so on. So in an area that's so dependent on tourism and hospitality, what was your role in managing that and working with the community during those very difficult, well, it was more than months, it was years, it's been years. So how did you manage that in your role as CEO where you are?
Yeah, we had a huge level 3 fire in the forest here in Margaret River just before Christmas, and that was, oh gosh, I think 2 weeks of our lives we'll never get back. The Shire president and I were we were there 24/7 doing media, talking to community, setting up evacuation centres. Obviously, all our staff sort of, went into that emergency response mode. We had the state government DFES came and set up a massive camp on the Oval. It was like a big army camp, and I think there the leadership role was really around continuing to manage the communications with the community and with the staff. I'm not a firefighter. I wasn't going to go out onto the fire ground, but it's about making sure that everything that we need to tell our community, we're telling them early, as quickly as possible, being as useful as possible, and cutting through any silly noise around stories of who's gone missing and da-da-da. It's really about, if you're displaced, here's how we're helping you, and constantly putting those messages out. And we did a few things on sort of, Facebook live stream and other things. And we had quite a few displaced people. Fortunately for us, there was no loss of private property or any people, obviously, in the local community affected, we're very fortunate. It was 8,000 hectares of beautiful forest and national park that burnt out, which is really, really sad. So we're also working on a recovery plan with various agencies around how to, as things regenerate, how to avoid things like weeds invading, and how to manage the tourists coming in and out. We recently, last week, became accredited as an ecotourism destination. So we take our environmental responsibilities really seriously here, and it's the messaging for us is about getting the right kind of tourist who's going to, behave sustainably, respect our environment. They come for those reasons of exploring and learning and enjoying the natural environment, rather than just sort of, trashing it. I think there was a lot of, over the COVID period, we had a lot of people from Perth who came down. They just bring their 4-wheel drives and driving all over the beaches, and was kind of going, hang on, this is really pristine, be careful, So it's about educating people to be as careful as they can and to respect the environment that we're in. We also over the summer had a lot of illegal campers, a lot of the backpackers that came down from Broome sort of did a leapfrog over Perth and Freo because there was a COVID outbreak there, came down here, and they're all out camping in the forest. And lovely though it is, when they're having parties and setting fire to things, that's a huge risk for us. So we spent a lot of the summer kind of going around and educating and trying to get them into campsites and that sort of stuff. So sometimes this stuff is unplanned and you're just in response mode, but you've got to be present, you've got to be communicating, you've got to be visible. You can't just sort of sit back and go, oh, well, leave the police to deal with it. The Shire, our community here expects the Shire to show a great amount of leadership with regard to their overall well-being and the well-being of our environment. So we're very proactive in that space.
Okay. I believe in September 2021, so at the end of last year, you launched a climate action plan. Can you talk to us about why you did that, why that was important, and how you're managing that going forward? Is that an important part of what you do?
Yeah, it is. And one of the reasons I was attracted to working here is the council at the time had set some, or were trying to set some goals around climate action. They wanted to be leaders. And that's not necessarily about waving lots of banners, but it's about doing really sustainable practices. So for us, we're trying to mainstream climate response, mitigation and adaptation through all of our operations. You know, so many councils are doing this stuff anyway, but we put it all in a plan. We now have only renewable energy sources. We signed up a partnership through Welga. So that's great. That's a huge thing for us, and probably one of our greatest expenses, and also obviously impact on emissions. We're looking at e-vehicles. The market just isn't right for us at the moment. Everything's really expensive here, but that's sort of in train, and we're reviewing and shuffling and working out when the point will be where we transition. We also do all the obvious things like, you know, FOGO bins and recycling and other things. Shortly after I started, the FOGO bins were introduced, and we did a huge education campaign, and we ended up where we used to divert 20% of our waste out of landfill, we're now up to 68%. And that was in 2 years. So that's huge, huge for us. And our community is quite proud of that. We've got good people in our community who really care about these things, and are really proactive about sort of helping the message get out. So for us, that's fortunate. Things we're doing align to our community's values, obviously. And here people are very environmentally conscious, and it's kind of quite a privilege to be able to be working with those groups to bring about some really strong, good outcomes there.
I've received another question. So you've worked with the local traditional owners to develop a plan to understand the cultural environmental values of certain areas of country within the Shire. Did you go beyond simply, well, what did consultation look like with elders, and how did you bring them into decision making moving forward?
Yeah, when I started, the relationships with the local traditional owners were sort of not particularly well. They were sort of ready. They consulted here and there and ticked boxes. So I did a big sit down with them when I first arrived, and over the course of 3 years, we've done a lot of project work together, where we invite them to help us co-design things. And most recently, we undertook a healthy country plan down in Augusta. And the important part of that was that it all started off with someone wants a path out to the lighthouse at the end of the Cape. And then we said, well, rather than ticking off an Aboriginal consultation at the end, once we've engineered it, why don't we talk to the Aboriginal people first, get a sense or an understanding of the environmental and cultural and heritage values of that whole area. And then we'll work out what or if anything is appropriate in that area. So we called it a Healthy Country Plan. We hired a local Aboriginal group with also they had also involved partnerships with some archaeologists. And they went and did a whole site survey around that bit of the Cape, and they found sort of archaeological evidence of their people from 9,000 years ago and things like that. So the path may still go ahead, but it will be very careful if it is, and it will go around some of those sites. We now understand what we're looking at on the ground in terms of artifacts, and there's a standing stone. There are also some flora and fauna studies that we've taken into account as well. So if the path goes through, then it's going to be very carefully designed to not interfere in any of those Aboriginal heritage areas. And the local traditional owners are delighted. We're doing dual naming projects. We're consulting them before we do anything on country. We're also trying to start looking at things like considering how to implement Wodandi sort of fire management, although that's an early conversation at the moment, but we're looking at some workshops with them around that. So it's very much about talking to them and understanding their values, and then deciding what's appropriate to do, rather than kicking off a project and then, oh, quick, fill out the section 18 form, please, asking them to sign it. It's the wrong way around. You've got to talk to them first. It's a co-design.
We're coming into the last final 5 minutes we've got till the end of this webinar, and there are so many more questions that I would like to ask you. I might try and slip a couple in, but for everyone who's dialed in online, could I ask you all to take part in responding to the poll question? It's a yes/no question. You should be able to see it at the bottom of your screen, and the question is, could you just say yes or no? Please tell us whether you've learned new information or skills related to career or leadership from watching this webinar. If I could get all of you just to let us know, that would be fantastic. I've got a couple of final questions here that I think we've got 3 minutes, so which one will I choose? This one's fascinating to me. In your employment contract, apparently there's a clause requiring you to let your counsel know if you're fatigued. Does that apply to senior men too? And is that only in your counsel, or is that something you've seen before? How did that happen?
I've never seen it before. My counsellors are, we used a Welga template for the contract, but my counsellors are very focused on care, well-being and other things. So when I saw that in there, I was actually I didn't negotiate that in. They said, we want you to be a success. We want you to be okay. If you're not okay, tell us and we can help you. Like, it was such a great thing. So no, that came from them.
Would you recommend that to other councils? And do you have that
definitely.
in employment contracts for people that work to you, that clause as well?
Yes, definitely. Because if your team are struggling, you need to know, because there are no winners if they're exhausted and stressed.
Just so interesting. I think Elon Musk now famously this past week has said something about if you don't come and work in the office, we consider that you've resigned, which is, polar opposites to what you're describing as, with having a clause like that in your contract. Do people, the Elon Musk approach would be, do people abuse that as a condition, or is that something that encourages health and well-being within the organisation and better work output?
It definitely encourages health and well-being here. We've got a lot of flexible work arrangements in place for people. Firstly, if people can work from home in their pajamas and they're still producing an output, I don't really care. I just want the work done and I want them to feel good. If they're driving long distances, because we are in the country and some of them live in a neighbouring town, then they're fatigued. It's also, if they can work from home, it minimises their carbon footprint. I think these days with technology, it's a win-win, but it also has to be managed and there has to be a trust. And I think it's very clear if the trust isn't there, then it's going to be problematic. So it's probably about careful management of what they're doing and making sure there's accountability, but it works really well for us here. And, I also talk about sort of women in leadership. I did a survey of my staff about a year ago and said, hey, anyone interested in doing this kind of job? And, and all the women said, no, thanks, way too stressful, way too political, not for us. But what we do want is enrichment, progression in the fields that we're interested in. And a lot of my sort of senior staff, I've got coordinators of health, rangers, legal, engineering, tech services, that they're all female. And they really enjoy what they do, but they don't want my job. So it's sort of, it's really interesting. They want that balance. They want challenges, but they don't necessarily want to climb a corporate ladder. They don't see that as success anymore. Their measure of success is having a good work-life balance, maybe going surfing after work, maybe riding their horse, maybe being with their kids a bit more, whatever it is, time for their life as well.
Oh, Steph, you've mentioned a number of things in those comments there that we're going to have to explore in future webinars, and I'm so sorry because inevitably just towards the end I've received some more questions about succession planning and a whole range of things. We'll have to return to those in future webinars. Thank you for those who sent them in. We will keep a record of your questions and look to raise them at future events. Sadly, we have to leave it here. We do promise it'll be 50 minutes every second Tuesday of the month for one of these conversations about women in local government, women in leadership roles. So Stephanie Addison-Brown, Chief Executive Officer of the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River, thank you so much for being part of the conversation today and for sharing your both your personal and your professional journey. And thank you also to everyone from right across the country who participated in the conversation today. Thank you particularly for those who provided questions for us and for all of those who took part in the poll. Today's webcast will be available in full on our YouTube channel, and on there'll be links provided on social media through LinkedIn and Facebook, so you'll be able to revisit it and share it with your colleagues if you'd like to. We always encourage you to do that, especially if there were people that weren't able to dial in today. If any of you would like to suggest a topic for a future webinar, please contact us at Local Government Professionals Australia in Canberra. You can do that through our social media channels, or just pick up the phone and give us a call or send us an email. I'm Catherine Carter. Join me again for the next Women in Local Government Future Leaders webinar, first Tuesday in July. And goodbye for now, and thank you for joining us.
But if you can